Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Firstly, hi and welcome to the office hours, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. The latest edition of office hours, it will be covering the newly released EHR forms. I'm pleased to say that we've got our product manager, Stephen Amon, joining us, along with our senior customer success manager, Sona Desai, and they will be taking you through today's office hours. And I will be handing over to Sona to start with.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I guess, to many of you. As Nathan mentioned, I'm Sona Desai. I'm with the customer success team here at Luma Health. I can see a couple of familiar names. So wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining the October version of Office Hours. As usual, we hope you'll find this presentation to be informative, helpful, not too spooky, and perhaps a nice little break from your usual busy routines. This call will be recorded. So for those that can't join from your organization, or if you want to have access to this after the call, that will be provided a little bit later. So quick agenda for this office hours. We are covering EHR forms. And so we'll jump into kind of a high level problem statement. Why did we develop this product here at Luma Health? What are the key benefits of EHR forms for your organization? And then some terminology. And then Stephen Amon from our product team will share with us a high level overview of what the EHR forms look like, as well as a live demo, so you all can see it really live. And then we'll wrap up with a quick Q&A and poll. So any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Thanks in advance, Nathan, for monitoring the chat, and we'll cover those sort of towards the end of the call. Great. All right, so I think next slide.
You're able to see the problem today, Sona?
Perfect, yes. Thank you. Great, so great. So as we've heard from many of our customers and partners, the COVID pandemic has really exacerbated staff burnout and turnover within many organizations, across the board. So today at Luma Health, what we've done kind of an effort to address this issue in part is the development of EHR forms. So administrative staff are under considerable stress. The volume of operational tasks that we understand y'all have to take on a daily basis and over week require you to remember and complete when checking in a patient, can leave you distracted, burnt out, and perhaps prone to mistakes. From a patient experience and a patient perspective, we understand, I understand that filling out paper forms can be cumbersome. Oftentimes you may have children running around, or there's just environmental aspects that are precluding you from filling out a form in a concentrated environment. And so you're spending more time waiting at the front desk versus being able to fill out that form kind of in the comfort of your own time. And then finally, the physicians, the folks that provide this great care and services to patients every day. There's the consideration of tools, right? So there's so many tools today, and oftentimes you may be switching from paper forms to the electronic medical record to another third-party system. And so our EHR forms really addresses helping streamline and centralize a tool for the physician's benefit. Perfect. So next slide. Okay, and so again, kind of touching on the three key benefits of the EHR forms. So we kind of wrap it up here as far as time, money, and stress. So again, we're saving time by eliminating handling paper forms. Money, saving on the bottom line by limiting headcount to handle forms from a staff perspective. And then finally, stress, reducing repetitive tasks for staff per patient. All right, so good news. If you're an organization, one of our customers, and you have mobile patient intake included in your Luma Health plan, it now includes EHR Forms, so you're eligible to get started today. If you don't know whether you have mobile patient intake in your plan or you have questions, we will link some resources later on in the presentation to identify if you have this and how you can get started. Perfect. And for the next part of this presentation, I will hand it over to Stephen Amon, and he'll share a little bit about the terminology, and then we'll launch into the demo.
Yep. For those of you, so I'm Stephen Amon, product manager behind EHR Forms. So super excited to talk to you guys about this today. If you have questions, go ahead, put them in the chat. Happy to make this more conversational too, and kind of pause on things if they don't make sense. But just going through this, you all are probably familiar with the CCDA, just a common standard for exchanging medical information. It's part of US CDI, so all of these interoperability efforts to make medical information be able to be exchanged from EHR to another EHR. The continuity of care document, that's the CCD, that's what we actually make and send to your EHR, just a type of CCDA. And then HISP is pretty much looks like an email address. It's the only way you can really send and receive health information. And the form PDF is just the fully completed PDF of the patient's form. And that's pretty much it. So the high level overview is when a patient completes a form, so they'll receive a text message, and we'll show screenshots of these in a second. They receive a text message, they open up the form, fill it out, and then you in Luma Health will see it. And then we will automatically create a CC document and send that to your HISP. And so your HISP is then associated with your EHR. It'll show up there. And typically your EHR has this capability to automatically match based on the patient name and date of birth. So it'll go to their medical record. And then it's on their medical record as an imported document, and then your clinical staff will approve the changes to the patient's medical record. So it's kind of a key thing I want to highlight. If your patient says that they've had the COVID vaccine, we don't automatically change that in the patient's medical record. I don't think anyone wants that. There is an approval step, but typically that's just a one-click add to medical record instead of having to type anything in. And going through this. So what to expect in your EHR. So this is kind of more just granular what we'll send to you. So the first one's the PDF already mentioned. So in Luma Health, if you've been using mobile patient intake, you've been seeing these PDFs in file management. It has any and every question in there. And there's dynamic and static controls. You can always include a consent block on a PDF, or if you want to make it shorter, always exclude it. You can include or exclude questions a patient never saw or answered. So tons of control there that you can utilize. The other one's the cover letter. So this typically shows up in the middle of the, kind of looks like an email, but this will be like the body of the email. And this is us just telling you, hey, we're Luma Health sending you this form for this patient, for this date of birth, et cetera. Just some information on what the form is and who it's for. And then the CCDA itself, this is the actual document that will be reconciled. So this has medications, social history, family history, and more. And we'll show these in a second, but the key thing I want to highlight here is we capture both recognized entries. So you can see this very scary looking clinical COVID name. That's actually Moderna. We allow you to put Moderna patient facing, so they just see that. But likewise, if your patient, we want to capture any input. And if they had a paper form, they might put, my doctor gave me something for my headaches. They don't know what that is. We also put that in medications. It won't reconcile to anything because that's obviously not a clinical name. But we'll show that information to your doctor so they can clarify with your patient what they mean by that. And then Here, we'll go through some screenshots. I just want to show you guys a quick high-level overview. And we also wanted to put these in the slides because we'll be sharing these afterwards, but just wanted to give you a sense. I'll do a real demo in a second, and you'll see kind of like what it's like to make this form, what it's like as a patient to fill it out. And then lastly, it's kind of like your staff to see it in Luma Health and even your doctor and your EHR, what that looks like. But just showing these here. So this is the actual form editor. You can see we have some clinical names and patient-friendly names. And we'll actually show what searching the database for these clinical names looks like in a second. You can do it by both the code and the name, but I'll wait to actually show that to you and explain it. Here, right, we're kind of just looking at the patient experience, typing in an Advil, and then likewise being able to put in that stomach ulcer medicine. The dosage and the frequency don't need to do. But again, I'm just kind of showing the different screens here, immunizations, allergies here. Likewise, we'll be able to capture both peanut and latex, so substances and food. And then of course, they put that tree pollen in the spring in the lower right. We'll also be able to capture that too, even though it's not a particular pollen of sorts. And likewise, surgical history. So I'll show this in a second, but you're able to actually put in these default options. And that allows a patient, if you have a location that's more of a specialty, an optometry location, you can put in eye-related operations here as well. Or if you're a journalist, you can leave this blank if you don't want to have to put in anything and simply allow patients to use that other box and put in a surgery that they've had. So again, just showing the family history here. And I'm just going to kind of move over this because I'm going to demo this in a second. These are more so that you can have these in the slide deck afterwards. And here's kind of a look at the kind of common design theme through them, from medications through family history and allergies. And again, the main themes we're trying to do are, one, allow you to put in clinical entries that'll reconcile back. So these are often the codes that your clinician and your EHR are looking for. And two, to allow your patient to put in whatever free text and give you whatever information they have or want to. So that's kind of the key things we just want to highlight here. And then lastly, our last one, social history, goes through smoke usage, drug usage, marital status, and exercise as well. And then likewise, you can always, of course, put in other questions on the form. And when it shows up in your account, you'll see something like this. And so this is actually what you can see is the send status. So we can see one was successfully sent. This NA means that you can control which forms you want to go back to your EHR. So if you don't have a form set to go back, it means not applicable. We weren't even trying to send that back, hence there's no error. But likewise, if you do have this Sonofun test patient and trying to send that back, there will be an error for it. And that basically happens if your HISP address isn't valid or there's an error for some reason when we try to send to it. We're just able to show you that here so that you know which forms have successfully sent back, as well as which ones have not. So let me go ahead and check the chat here. Yes, yes, ECW does support this. Joel, we do have to add one thing. We realized ECW does have a different medications database, Metaspan, than what we typically see with RX Norm. So we're adding that in the future as well. And then in terms of which specialties we support, I imagine you're asking about the form editor. Feel free to clarify in the chat, but you can pretty much make, I think this next part is the demo, which will be easier to show you. But you can pretty much make the form to be any kind of specialty you want. All the operations, all the immunizations are in there. So it's pretty flexible, and I can show you that in a second. Here's the actual kind of screenshot of what it typically looks like in your EHR. You've probably seen this before, and it's again going to be different for every EHR. We'll have a video of what this actually, the full process of seeing it show up there, reconciling the data back, putting it on the patient record for at least one example of an EHR. But again, yours will probably look a bit different. That's just the nature of EHRs. So without further ado, let's go to the fun part, which is the demo. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different view here. So here you can see we're in mission control. And so I'm going to take you through the full flow here. We're going to pretend we've never set this up before. I'm a mobile patient intake, user, and I hear about this EHR Forms thing. What do? Well, the first thing you do is you come over here to Forms. So I'm going to go to Feature Settings. I'm going to go to Forms, and this is going to be checked on, but let's pretend this was checked off. I'm going to go ahead and check this on. I'm now able to use it, and I'm going to put in my HISP address here. So you have to have you choose a main HISP address that you want all your forms to go to. In addition, we allow you to send it to the provider as well, in which case you'd go to each provider's detail page and put in their HISP address. We're creating a setup wizard to make that step a lot easier. And you can also reach out to your CSM to help you with that. But for an easy, if you also just want to test to see how this looks in your EHR, you can simply put in your HISP address here. Go ahead and click Save, and then you're pretty much done. You've turned it on for your account. At this point, you have to select and set up which forms you want to send back. So just giving the check, yes, NextGen is supported. That's actually the EHR will be showing. And we are going to add TESA insurance cards in the future as something we push back. That's actually going to be a part of our insurance verification. So yes, in the future, very soon, we will have that. There's a number of questions coming in. They keep coming in. So let's go ahead. I do have a Q&A session, so I'll just save these for the end, and then we'll go through the chat one by one and answer these. So we've set it up for our account. I was a mobile patient intake user. I've turned this on. Now I need to go in and select which forms I'm actually going to send back. So I come over here into Form Builder, and then what I can do is I can go ahead and come down here, and you see there's this CCDA starter template. I can go ahead and just click Use this template, and it gives me a kind of starter intake form for the CCDA. I can put in patient information, medications. Here we have some immunizations as well. So these are all the clinical questions that we allow you to put in. And so for instance, if I wanted to put in another one, let's say I want to search for measles, I can go ahead and do that here. And likewise, I can go ahead and search for, I know the Moderna CPT code 208, I can put that in as well. And then these here are the friendly names. So again, the clinical name's often pretty scary. You don't want your patient to see that. And so what you can go ahead and do is put in a friendly name for this. You simply click on this pencil icon. So if I wanted to put in one for MMR, I could go ahead and do that here. And we'll just put in MMR for the sake of the demo. Medications, you don't have to. We'll show that in a second. The patient searches for it. So there's no options for you to put in. Immunizations there is, surgical there is, and this is kind of that note for the specialty. Again, we're pulling through the or from the US CDI database. So pretty much any surgery you have or that your EHR uses, there's a common dictionary. You can search for that here. So this is a gross example, but if I was putting eye, you can see there's a number of different eye procedures I can do if I was going for that optometrist use case. And this is really where you would, work with your clinicians to figure out what form you want to create. Or if you're a more general practice, then you likely want to leave this blank so that your patients can simply put in what their general problem is. I'll show family history in a second on the patient side as well. So this is typically obviously that kind of grid question with the diseases and relations in the columns. But here again, you can simply put in patient-friendly names. So if I want to put in, you can see there's all different types of Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's, and I can give that the easy friendly name of this. And likewise, if I want to put in arthritis, I can also do that as well. And you can see there's a multitude. There's the more general forms or the more specific. For this one, I'll simply put in the general form. And this is really where the code, if there's a specific type of arthritis that you want to put in, likely the most general kind, you can go ahead and do that as well and search for it. Lastly, we have allergies. So this is similar to medications. You're simply going to search for it. We'll show the patient experience in a second. You can also change this title, right? To say including latex. Totally up to you what you want it to be. This last one's social history. You can change the initial title, but you can't change these options. That's because these are kind of hard coded. These are what all the EHRs recognize. So we want to keep these definitions intact. And then likewise, we just have the long question here. Again, this is a form. You could put all sorts of branching in here with all these rich questions. We have the new insurance verification component that we're putting in. All of this is able to be used here. So you can put it in, make whatever form you want, branch your own questions, put in payment questions, totally up to you. For the sake of the demo, I'll just kind of leave this here. And for filling this out, I'll delete that patient information question. And I'll go ahead and save this. So that's the admin's experience of creating a form. At this point, what's really interesting is, okay, let's send it to a patient. So I'll go ahead and open up Hub Junior. I will set this to send to myself. And then once this squiggly generates, give it a little refresh. I'll copy this, open a new tab, put that here. So I'll show the mobile experience in a second once it loads. So I'm a patient. We're skipping the text message. So obviously we sent the patient a text message from that hub, and they would see that on their phone, and they would open it up and then see this screen here in the case of a Grand Health scenario. And once they start the form, this medications, they can simply put in Advil and select this one, and this would reconcile to your EHR. They could put in the dosage, 10 milligrams, and they can say twice a day. And likewise, I mean, the hope here is that they really have their medication in front of them, and they can just search for whatever clinical name it is. It's quite extensive, so just kind of showing that here, all the different options. But we also allow them to put in free text. So if they simply want to say, I have, since I'm sticking with this stomach medicine example, stomach medicine, they can simply put that in as well. They can leave the dosage and the frequency blank. Those will just be empty, obviously. So whatever information they want to put in, they can go ahead and put that in. And then likewise, these are the options we had. So we had the Moderna vaccine. I can say I had that in 2020, 2021, and then we can skip, I did not have this. We can say didn't have that vaccine or the Pfizer. I don't know what year I had the flu shot. Let's say I've had it in the last 2 years, but I don't know which one. MMR, and then we left that a blank entry. Here for the tetanus, I can give it 2020. But then likewise here, I can search for a specific vaccine if I've had one. And then likewise, again, that free text, I can just say, I've had a booster shot. Obviously, that's not a clinical entry, but they can still put that in. They can give it a year, saying it was this year they had a booster shot. And then that would be where your clinician in office clarifies with the patient, hey, you said you had a booster shot in your immunizations. What exactly does that mean? So here for surgical history, this is again, would be totally dependent on how you built this. If you had the general use case, you'd probably leave this blank and you would just see this here, at which point the patient could add options. If they had, for instance, a compartment syndrome surgery, they could put that in here with the year. And then likewise, they could simply put in, I had a knee operation, very generic, not going to match to anything. But they can still put that in. They can leave the year blank. But since we do have these options, I'll go ahead and select this middle one here, the gallbladder, and whichever ones they select. So if they select multiple, they go through multiple of these screens. They select which year they had it, or they select, I don't know what year. In this case, I'll simply put 2020, and we'll continue on there. So this family history, again, this is typically the kind of grid question. The way we break this up instead is we show you all the diseases possible in your family. So we allow you to put up to 20 options in here. It's quite extensive. And you can go ahead and select which ones the patient you have in your family. We'll select these two. And then for each one of the diseases, you select which relations have had it. So if your grandparents have, and let's say a mother as well, you can go ahead and put that in. And then if only one paternal grandparent had your Alzheimer's, you could also put that in as well. But if you come to the end and you had something that wasn't in there, you can of course put that in here. So you can simply say that someone had, sticking with the example of measles, and you can say that that was your paternal grandparents, but you can also simply say bad back and say that your father had that as well. Really easy. Whatever you want to put in here can be done. So if you had, for instance, a COVID example in your base, you could put that here and then say that your sibling had that as well. So for allergies, we changed this title to include latex. So you can search for substances as well as food. So if we type in peanut, you'll see that example here. They put in both smooth and crunchy. But then likewise, we could also put in that tree pollen in spring, or I'm allergic to bee stings. And this will also actually show up. They can say bee venom. But for the free text example, I'll just say bee stings. And you can say rash. You can say hives. And for this one, we probably want to put trouble breathing. And of course, you can leave those reactions blank as well. None of it's mandatory, whatever they're able to put in. On this last question, we're looking at the social history. So for marital status, you simply select which of the dropdowns each of these are. So marital, smoking, alcoholic drinks. This change we definitely need to make per week. And then recreational drug usage. And then likewise, exercise per week. And then I think we had one last, yeah. So here again, just highlighting that this is a normal form. So you can fill this out any way you want to and set it up any way you want to. So again, the CCDA questions, and we'll see that in a second, those will map back those social history, medications, allergies, but you can still collect any information you want from the patient. Just want to highlight that here. So you say, nope, looking forward to the appointment. And we can go ahead and finish the form. At this point, they see the typical screen where they can chat with your staff, call the phone number you've provided, however they want to get in contact with you. So we'll go ahead and with that, hop back to the kind of presentation here. What I want to show is an example of how this looks in an EHR. So again, every EHR is different. Every EHR has a different UI and how they handle this, and different support for the CCTA. But what I want to just give an example of is what the full flow looks like. So here we are. This is NextGen. What I've just done here, the Risotto holding tank is essentially how they receive HISPs and CCDAs. So you can see I've sent one for myself. And at this point, there's automatic patient matching. But if we send a CCDA for a patient that doesn't exist, we can also create that patient here. So in this case, we'll match it to an existing patient manually to find. And typically this step is done automatically if the name and date of birth match. It just depends on what your EHR is capable of. But here we've matched it to a patient record, and now we're essentially opening that patient record. And you can see here the different patient history, et cetera. I'll actually go back and let's go really quick. Normal speed. What I'm doing here is I'm clinically reconciling it. So we have this incoming CCDA. Now I'm opening it up to reconcile. And this would be where your clinician is actually checking with the CCDA and seeing how it looks and adding changes they want to approve to the patient's medical record. So this is not the exact one I sent. This is just a recording. Opening these up is typically a hassle, so I wanted to kind of streamline it. Here you can see for that penicillin entry, there's an add button. So I go ahead and click add, and then a mode will pop up, which asks me even more specifically within NextGen if there's other types of penicillin we want to specify, which form factor, and then also more specifically the dose options. Your clinician can do that as well here too. And then your EHR will also have some other approval steps that need to be done. This is just making changes to the medical record, and however your EHR handles that. But likewise, you can see it for medications, the allergies there, procedures, and then likewise immunizations. We, in this case, had a few different ones. And again, it's really just the add button. And then you can see here, family history, different ones we had, and then likewise the social history, the smoking status, descriptions, etc. So that's the basic gist of how it looks in an EHR, in this case, NextGen. One step I actually did want to go back to, realize I skipped, was we saw this completed by a patient and what the patient experience was, and then we kind of skipped ahead to the provider experience in the EHR. One of the things I wanted to highlight was what this looks like if you're an admin tracking these forms. So this one's going to be an error. I just want to clarify that. Oh, it's actually going to be an NA. The reason it's an NA is because when I came over here and came to this form builder here, you can see that I have this set to not sending to the EHR. What I actually want to do is set this to, hey, send that to the EHR when it's completed. And then it'll go ahead and send every time a patient completes that form. But the key thing I wanted to highlight is if I had sent this to send, it would have actually been an error. And the reason that being is I simply put in my work email in there. That's not an actual HISP. You can't send medical records and CCDAs to any old Gmail account. Doesn't work that way. So just want to clarify here that for the workflow of you are an office admin tracking which forms have sent back, I'll go ahead and extend the range so that we can see some other examples. You can go ahead and come in here, and I've done this demo a few times, so there's going to be a number of errors. But what you're seeing here is basically the status of each patient form. And typically, if your HISP works once, it'll work every single time. This is more of kind of a setup step if your HISP is not done correctly. But typically, once you put that in and it's a valid HISP, you do a test form, it's never going to break. And so you shouldn't see any errors, but if you do, just rest assured, you can always come in here. You can in fact come in and filter by the sent to EHR status error, and you'll go ahead and see all of those right here. And then you would, in that case, follow up with the patient. You have some kind of fixes to do, remediation steps. But typically the hope is you would simply just see these being sent and then showing up in your EHR for your clinician to approve of the changes. And so that's kind of the gist of the EHR forms video. So the main benefit, of course, is these showing up automatically in your inbox. And the hope is your EHR has automatic patient matching, so you don't have to do this step of matching it to the patient name and date of birth. And then, of course, going over here to the step of your doctor reconciling this into the patient record with one click. And really, it's more of an approval. The key step here is we don't want the patient to be allowed to say, I had a COVID vaccine, and then us automatically add that to their medical record. No one wants that. It has to be approved by a clinician. So a key point there, just wanted to highlight. And then the last thing I wanted to go through is, well, I already did the kind of setup step, but I'm including the slides in here as well, because we're going to send these out. So again, if you want to start using this, if you have mobile patient intake, go ahead, come in here, click this on, go ahead and put in your HISP address. And of course, that HISP address has to be connected to your EHR. If you're not sure how to do that, there's typically online documentation, but your EHR representative should also be able to help you with that. That second step, again, is just coming in, creating a form, clicking the CCDA starter template, and then step number 3, don't forget, as I did, go ahead and check the box here to send this completed form to your EHR. And this, again, is just giving you control to make sure that you can set which forms are active, right, which are hidden from your staff to send to patients, and you can control which forms you want to send back to your EHR. You don't have to send every single form back. And that's pretty much it. Then you're done, you're set up. It's a hopefully pretty easy process, but we'll also be making a setup wizard just to make it a little bit easier and kind of have some more guidance around the EHR piece of this. But just wanted to kind of highlight that. And at this point, we'll go ahead and go through what I'm sure are a copious amount of questions. So Nathan and Sona, let me know if you have some questions in particular you think we should go through, else I can go ahead and go down the list here. Yeah, seems like we've been answering them as we've gone along.
Thank you, Stephen, for going through that. Yes, we do have quite a few questions, but we're going to pick out a couple of immediate questions to begin with. One topic, and I think you just addressed this, is how do I go about getting a HISP email address?
Yes, so there's a few ways to do it. The HISP email, again, is just a email address able to receive medical information. So direct trust is one way you can do it. And I think it's, don't quote me here. I think it's below $300 for a year of this, if not a one-time fee. But your EHR should also already have one for you. The main thing you want to make sure is that it's hooked up to your EHR. So there's typically, you can do this on your own typically, and there's documentation online for this. But it does kind of vary from EHR to EHR. That's kind of the tricky, complicated part of this, is your EHR specifically and their support for the CCDA and interoperability standards is kind of a key piece. Hence, that's allowing you to do a test, et cetera. But to get a HISP, I would say go to Direct Trust. You can sign up for one there, and then you can simply look up how to put in HISP for my, insert your EHR name into Google, and you should see some documentation to there.
Cool, thank you, Stephen. Got another question. Not sure who the user is right now, but I'll give you the question, Stephen. I see where it is in Luma that he just showed, but where does the info go into the EMR for ECW?
For ECW, it goes into, I can actually share some documentation. Maybe I should put that in the chat. It goes into the progress note. And it's, if I remember, sorry, there's a lot of EHRs to do this for. It's P2P. So it goes into the progress note, and the key change we have to make there, we'll make this probably by the end of the year. We just have to add a database that ECW uses. They use Metaspan instead of ArcStorm. And that way you can reconcile it with one click. Just a minor nuance we found. But it's going to show up in the progress note. And so whatever P2P flow you have, that'll be it.
Great. We've got another question from Leslie. What does the approval process look like when we pull the information into the EHR?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that was before we showed the video. And again, it's going to be different for each EHR, but I'll go ahead and highlight this here. It is this one right here. So it's being difficult with allowing me to full screen this. You can see right here when we have the patient look up Stephen Amon, that's the matching it piece. But then when we actually go to reconcile it, that step I showed where there was an add button and then we added penicillin to the record. NextGen wanted to clarify even more specifically, which of these doses in which of these formats. That's the reconciliation. So that's where your doctor's approving these changes to the record.
Great, thank you, Stephen. We've got a question from Michael. Can certain forms be sent depending on visit type, like pediatric forms versus adult forms?
Can certain forms be sent based on visit type? The answer is yes. So that's yeah. So that's basically whatever appointment type you have, right? So a patient's coming in for a regular check-in versus they're coming in for, a procedure, you want to send the pre-op form. All of that's able to be done custom actions. And so, you say for this appointment type, send this form. Yeah, you can absolutely control that, and each form will be different. You can have one send to your EHR. Likewise, if you have a consent form today, you just want to send the PDF of that, have that attached to the patient's record, you can do that too. You don't even have to set up the CCDA questions. You just click send this to my EHR. And if there's no CCDA questions, right, there's no medications, clinical information, we'll just send the PDF as well. So that's an easy way to get started with consent forms.
Great. Next question from David. How cumbersome is provider approval for the EHR?
How cumbersome is provider approval for the EHR? Yeah, so that's again somewhat dependent on your EHR. You can see for NextGen here, we're just clicking the add button. And so that's saving them the type in step that your EHR typically, it depends on the medicine, might want to clarify even further. So in that case with the penicillin, right, I had to choose which of the specific doses for these different formats was it. So that's typically the flow. Sometimes you can just click and add it and there's no more specification you have to do. But yeah, the general hope is you just click and add it. But again, your EHR, it's dependent upon your EHR support for US CDI standards. So Congress has passed the Cures Act, which incentivizes via fines EHRs to comply with this. And so in the future, they'll become even more compliant. But that is somewhat, dependent on your EHR's support of it today. So sometimes you might see, like in in social history, your EHR might support everything except smoking status. That's kind of an example of EHRs may not necessarily support all traits, but again, you'll, no matter what, get the full patient PDF in there and be able to reconcile whatever traits you can't. So that's kind of the key piece there. And yeah, it's easy enough for you today to go in, send one to yourself, see how it looks. And if you have any issues, you can reach out to us or your EHR account rep.
Thank you, Stephen. We've got another question. Got plenty of questions today. Can the PDF be created? Sorry, can the curated PDF be uploaded directly to patient docs in the EHR?
Yes. So I would need to know what specifically your EHR is to kind of get into the details there. But yeah, the whole idea, the happy flow, is that you have an existing patient, they have an appointment coming up, you send them an intake form automatically through custom actions for this appointment. They fill it out, that then gets sent to your EHR. Your EHR sees, hey, I have this patient name and this date of birth matching. Cool, I'm going to take that CCDA and that PDF and put it on the patient's record. And at that point, if you were just sending the PDF, you're done. You already have that there attached. It's really the kind of CCDA, if there's medical information in there you want to make official on the medical record, that's the step where your provider has to come in and say, yep, I'm going to approve this change. Click add.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. We've got a question from E. Guzman. If a patient is not in our system yet, does this stay in Luma until we manually add them to ECW?
Yes. So at the moment, you do have to, so you can see, let me actually go back to this flow. I think this will help. And here. So today, bam. So today, you typically have the option, which you can see here is there's a new option in the bottom right. Sorry, this isn't allowing me to go full screen. But today you can you can create one if you click the new option. So ECW will say, hey, we don't know who this is. And you'll say create new patient record. And that's this new button here in NextGen. And then once you create that new patient record, the only thing in there will be this CCDA. In the future, what we want to do is actually, if we have a PS Plus form, right? So we schedule a new patient, we want to create that patient in your EHR and then put this on there so you don't have to do this step. That's in the future. We don't have that as of yet today. So you would see these in your inbox. And that's probably the change in workflow, is that you likely have someone, if you're going to start using these, just kind of monitoring this inbox and making sure that, hey, for patients who are new, let's go ahead and create that record. But definitely in the future, we want to do that for you and create it in your EHR.
Thank you, Stephen. Got a question from Anna. To confirm, reconciling the info from the form puts the info into a progress note, but not into the editable areas within the patient's chart, like the patient clipboard or areas that we are typically filling out manually.
So without knowing the EHR, sorry, Nathan, did you say the progress note?
Yes.
I'm going to guess that's for ECW, in which case it also depends. There's different versions of ECW and NextGen. But for that one, I think I'll have to get back to you. I'm not 100% sure I know what you're talking about, but I think maybe we should follow up online. We can get my email address and then happy to work through that with you.
Yeah, we can follow up on that, Stephen. Got a question. Could we designate a specific folder in a patient's chart in ECW?
That's somewhat dependent on ECW. So, well, that is dependent on ECW. Basically, once we send the CCTA, there's a lot of different flows you can have within your EHR, right? It's all about customizations. It's really up to your EHR's abilities and how it can handle in taking these CCDAs. Typically, right? So the options we allow you to do are to send it to a single HISP address or to send it to the appointments provider so that they can see that there. And then it show up on the account. The option for adding a folder within the patient's medical record, I think it typically will show up in attachments, but there might be a way that you can specify, hey, from this sender, put it into this folder in ECW. I don't know that workflow specifically off the top of my mind.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. We've still got questions rolling in here. Is there a list of EHRs that you work with? I'm curious if Brightree allows this integration.
Oh, yes. I've not tested with Brightree before, but what's nice is that you can do that today. Again, you can simply send one of these to yourself. Shows up in a few minutes typically. So if you turn it on, put in your HISP address, create one of these, send it to yourself for a test patient. You can see exactly how Brightree supports it for yourself. But to answer your question, I have not tested with them.
Yeah, we've got another question here from Amanda. I still haven't seen anything / answers addressing where the info goes in the EMR, just in docs or right into the progress note where these are specifically for ECW.
Yeah, so it does go into the EMR if you approve it. It does. So when it first shows up in ECW, it's in the progress notes. And then the one thing, again, we have to add is the medications database for ECW. That's kind of a key piece so that you don't have to type in the name right now. ECW uses a different one than other EHRs. So that's the main kind of differentiation here, is that it's going to show up in the progress note and then you're going to approve it and it should show up in the medical record. Again, though, if it depends on your version of ECW, I don't know exactly how yours is, but you can test it today to see that and it should show up. I will say for ECW, they do this weird thing where they hold it. So typically it shows up within minutes. ECW, I do know they process CCDAs, not something we control. It's on their part. They choose to kind of hold on to it for a bit. So just know there will be a delay for that once you send it, but it's within a day typically, which is not as fast as we would like it. But yeah, if you have questions on specifically how it looks, you want to play around with it, again, I would suggest just testing it and sending one to yourself to see all of these kind of nuances. And then hopefully your account rep for your EHR can help you out with that as well.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And we'll make this the last question for the moment. And this is from Jen. Is there a functionality where the CCDA would update demographic information and/or insurance information in the chart as well? Or is it only medical chart info?
Yeah, so insurance is next. We're adding that now so that you can have a single insurance capture component, and then that'll be able to be pushed back. As far as the patient demographic section, that also we need to do. Again, we're still in kind of the investigation phase for this, but what we'll be adding is a demographic section where the patient comes in, approves, hey, this information is correct, or no, actually this is different. The update flow, I don't have an answer for you yet, just because it's a little tricky with matching it based on the patient's name and date of birth. I would imagine we'll be able to update things like the address, the contact method. But for instance, not that would happen, but if they did change either their name or date of birth, I don't think we'll be able to update those since that's how we're matching it.
Well, a big thank you to Stephen and Sona today for hosting the office hours. If we haven't answered any of your questions, we'll be following up and we'll do our best. And also feel free to reach out to your customer success manager if you haven't got any further questions, and we will try and get back in touch as soon as possible. For now, I believe you'll be getting directed to a poll at the end of the call. Please go ahead and fill that out. But again, thank you for taking time out of your day to attend office hours. Hope you've enjoyed it. Very useful information. And again, a big thank you to Stephen and Sona for putting this together. So thank you.
Thanks. We'll be adding more documentation too as we go on in the future so that you can see what it looks like in your EHR without having to test it. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.